Sports with Sean Caravilles.
Marcel Kittel continued to break records in this year's Tour de France as he won his 5th stage in this year's race, while Chris Froome retained his yellow jersey. Here's BBC 5 Live with a roundup of stage 11.
The Tour de France.
Welcome to Spoke at the Tour de France. I'm OJ Borge. Our location this evening is in En-Saison, which is less the gateway into the Pyrenees, more halfway up the hallway looking at the family portraits. I'm alongside Rob Hales and Simon Brotherton. And Rob Hales, our location on the balcony of our hotel for this evening. This is where we stayed last year. I'd forgotten about that.
Very reminiscent of last year. And we drove past it then as well and had to do a U-turn down the road. Just tucked in off the road.
There's actually, Simon, a very large cockerel, which is just down from where we are, beyond the Petanque pitch, which, if you hear it crow, and I hope it does at some point as we do this, it has got the hoarsest crow I have ever heard of any cockerel ever.
Hoarsest or horsiest?
I don't know. What's the correct pronunciation?
I don't know, but I think that I'm lucky enough to have a room on the front, so I'll be hearing it loud and clear.
At any time, early, late, whenever it goes off. So then, we are in the Pyrenees, which is tomorrow. That'll be something the riders have to take on tomorrow. Let's talk about today, though. Stage 11. Once again, it was one for the sprinters, and once again, it was a long day in the saddle. And then this happened.
1 kilometre to go. He's just in front of the peloton. He's doing everything he can to stay away from them and evade their clutches. They're bearing down on him here. And Mathieu Bodno, with a gargantuan effort here on this 11th stage of the Tour de France, is so close to winning the stage, but I still don't think he's going to do it. He looks behind and he knows it's going to be so close here. His mouth is gaping wide open. He's still pushing hard. He's got a left-hander. He's got 600 metres to go. He's so close to what would be a first stage in the Tour de France in his career. He's still sprinting hard. They're chasing him all the time. Boas and Hagen's in a pretty good position. So's Michael Matthews, and Dan McClay's in there as well. McClay's up towards the front, and a little bit further back is Marcel Kittel. Cofidis looking around, seeing where the Buhani can get involved in this sprint now. Over 4.5 hours in the saddle. Kittel tries to go through the middle, but Boas and Hagen now going for it, and Boas and Hagen's pushing hard. Michael Matthews tries to come around the outside. Matthews straining every sinew. Here comes Kittel up towards the line. It's so close. Kittel gets it. Groenewegen pushed him really hard there, right at the end of the stage. Marcel Kittel has done it again. 5 of the best for the German rider, the outstanding sprinter in this year's Tour de France. He showed his face at the very last moment. Again, a superb effort from the German. He has the acceleration. He has the confidence to wait until the moment that matters. Groenewegen knew that it was the wheel to follow. He tried to go with it. He tried to go past, and he just couldn't get there.
So that is number 5 for Marcel Kittel in this year's Tour de France. He really is the sprinter to be. Before we talk about him, let's talk about the man who was away for so long. It was so close.
Yeah, and what a monstrously impressive effort from Mathieu Bodno. Bodno was part of a 3-man breakaway. He was in the lead, either with 2 others or on his own, for 203.5 kilometres today. He attacked the other 2 breakaway riders with 28 kilometres to go. He's a good time trialist. He needed to be. He's a 3-time national champion. He was 6th in the Olympic Games in the road time trial last year, 4th in the World Championship. He rode phenomenally well on his own, settled into that time trialling rhythm, and the peloton chased him all the way into Pau. They really pushed hard. You had riders like Philippe Gilbert on the front, straining at the leash, trying to bring him back. And it took them ages to cut into that advantage that he had, which stayed around 40 seconds for quite a long time. It was agonisingly close from, apparently it was 242 metres from the line when he was finally caught. Perfectly timed by the sprinters, but I think they just about got away with it, to be honest.
There was a great tweet that was put out by @LeTourData, which is great for those little bit of nuggets, those little bits of data. And they said that apparently Bodno averaged 44.5 kilometres for 203 kilometres, caught with just, as you said, a couple of 100 metres to go to the line. How close was it? Did you think at any point that he was away, Rob Hales?
Right near the end, I thought, you know what, he could very well do this. It was very unfortunate that there was a potential for crosswind in the final 15-20 kilometres, and what happened was a lot of the GC teams were moving up and actually put an awful lot of impetus into the peloton. Had it been a very straightforward run-in, he may very well have stayed away, but because there were very few sprinters teams wanting to really push on hard, and I think it was only because of those GC teams really putting some speed into that peloton that he actually got brought back. I mean, it was so close. In fact, Kittel had already launched his sprint before he'd passed Bodnar. It was that close to the line. Incredible. So tight, but he earned himself a place on the podium anyway.
But it was so impressive for someone to do that. Normally a rider who has about 50 seconds advantage with 25 kilometres to go, there's no way they would stay away. It was so impressive, and another reason why I was so impressed with him today was he was prepared to actually attack and form a breakaway group or be part of it. Only 3 of them attacked at the start of the stage. I do not understand why more teams didn't get involved in that. 3 riders went away, the rest of the peloton just filled the road, blocked the road and sat up. And it was really disappointing because it was a long stage, and I don't see why more teams didn't get involved, because the bottom line is you bring it all together for a sprint, the chances are 9 times out of 10 in this year's Tour you're just setting up Marcel Kittel for a win. So you may as well get involved in the breakaway to start with and see how that goes.
Well, there were other sprinters teams, talking of Marcel Kittel, who took the stage today. They were saying that he's unbeatable. Marcel Kittel's unbeatable. And before we talk about him and his stage win, why weren't they attacking? Why didn't they get in the breakaway?
It's really bizarre. You know, you've got Lotto Soudal, who rightly so is saying, Andre Greipel, he has won a stage, and every Grand Tour he's ridden, we have to put faith in him. He's just not firing on all 4 cylinders at the moment. Put a man in the break. It takes pressure off your guys having to lead out Greipel. It puts more pressure, obviously, on Quick-Step Floors. Direct Energy. I mean, they are one of the squads who you would expect to put men up in the break. Ironically, when they actually chased, they got onto the front of the peloton in the closing kilometres. That was when Bodnar, his lead extended, which is, I mean, it's a little bit comical to be fair. It was extremely disappointing. Put riders up there, it would put more pressure on Quick-Step. So far, Team Sky have had an armchair ride in this, and Quick-Step, all right, Julian Vermont has done an awful lot of work. Fair play to him, because he is put on the front of the peloton from the word go pretty much, and has done an awful lot, probably more kilometres than anybody really in the peloton. But they're just handing it at the moment to Kittel. Okay, it's going to change now because we go away from the sprint stages, but up to now he's had it, his team's had it relatively easy, but he is the best, and fair play to him for those stages that he has taken.
He's not just head and shoulders better than everyone else. He's head, shoulders, hips,
knees,
thighs,
and toes.
knees, toes, and pretty much his cleats as well. He is that good. So let's hear from the winner of today's stage, the man who is wearing the green jersey. Marcel Kittel was speaking to Gemma Sturber.
Marcel, that was incredible yet again. Talk us through that sprint finish.
Yeah, I was again able to have a huge and really good team effort working for me. That the boys did an incredible job to still catch Bodnar back just before the line. I think that was an amazing job also to keep control during the whole race today. And in the end, I found my line in the sprint. I could start in the right moment. I had the power again. I had the good timing. So that's really nice.
How does this compare to the previous 4?
I think it's special because it's my personal record now at the moment to win 5 stages in the Tour de France, and today wasn't also super easy. I think with the wind it was always nervous. A few crashes were there in the bunch, and everyone tried to stay in front. So again, a great day, and it's super nice.
It was super nice, says Marcel Kittel as he takes his 5th stage of the Tour de France. Is he now the best sprinter in the world? Is that a difficult question to answer?
He's one of the only ones left here, to be fair. It would have been very interesting to see Demar, Cavendish, Sagan and Kittel going head to head. Obviously everybody else is struggling in his wake at the moment, but ultimately you can only beat who is here, and he is every time.
And he's back to where he was about 3 years ago now.
Yeah,
He's found that sort of form again, which has been
not a great surprise, is it?
If we're talking about him being the best sprinter in the world, or at least the best one that's here, currently...
He's the best rider, he's the best sprinter in the Tour de France.
He is the best sprinter in the Tour de France. What makes a great sprinter? If we were going to look at a sprinter and break it down, what makes a great sprinter?
I mean, it's it's obviously top-end speed, top-end power, that short burst of power. It's the nerve to do what they do, to ride in the wheels, especially in those closing kilometres, because can be very nervous. Patience is something that Kittel certainly has, and confidence. And when you put all that together, along with some good quality teammates to look after you, it just goes to show. You know, there are other guys, obviously Greipel has got a great team around him. They are committing so well, and I think they've got to be applauded for that to a certain extent. But Greipel just doesn't have the power at the moment. But when everything slots into place, as it is with Kittel, he just rides away with it.
It doesn't get more French than somebody sparking up with a squeeze box, does it, round the corner as we're here?
I was just going to add one thing as well to what Rob was saying about sprinting. I think instinct as well, because and decision making and processing of information. You have to make so many split-second decisions in the final kilometres. You have to, as well as having the legs and everything else, you have to be able to instinctively make the right call constantly as to where your position and where you're going. And there are so many decisions you have to make constantly.
Yeah, if it's not instinctive, if you have to sit back and think about it and process it, it's often too late. So it is literally, you don't think about it.
When we were talking about Dan McClay yesterday, who had a great stage yesterday, he was there or thereabouts again today. You were saying that he went too early. He didn't have the confidence in his own ability or the stage to leave it as late as Marcel Kittel.
No, he didn't quite have the patience. He felt confident in what he was doing. He said it felt the right time. But obviously when you've got guys around him like he has, he needs to wait just a little bit more. When he does kick, he does have the speed. But unfortunately today, he followed Kittel. He had the right wheel, but he just didn't have the power today when Kittel went.
Well, we've talked a lot about Dan McClay, actually. We've talked about him. So let's hear from the current #1 British sprinter who's here at the Tour de France.
So Dan, 5th today. How was it out there?
Yeah, I think it was an okay day. It was a little bit long and a little bit nervous the whole day with the wind a little bit. Not so fast, but you could nervous, and it's just like a few stupid little crashes and but all in all okay. The last few kilometres was quite hectic. A few bits in the middle of the road and people bouncing off speed bumps and stuff, but yeah, 5th place. Try my best to win, but I think Kittel was stronger and he dragged a few guys in the wheel past to the line also, so not much else I could do.
Dan McClay there speaking to Gemma Sturber. Just to remind you, our current location is on the route into the Pyrenees. This is where most of the Tour vehicles will go tomorrow as they get towards the end of tomorrow's stage. Is it just 3 summit finishes in this year's Tour de France?
Yeah, just 3.
And one of them's tomorrow.
Yeah, one of them's tomorrow at Peyregoud. We've got some tough climbs on the menu. It's a fairly easy-ish start, but it gets tougher and tougher the longer the stage goes on. A lot of climbing tomorrow. Some famous climbs on the route as well. The Col de Monte, which has featured a good few times in the Tour de France. The Porte de Balles, which is an all category, a beyond category climb, so one of the real big nasty ones. The Col de Peyresourde is on the route as well. That's featured 68 times, I think, in the Tour. It's first featured in 1910, so it's one of the really famous climbs in the Tour de France. And we've got the finish at Peyregoud as well. So it's going to be a really tough, gruelling day for the riders.
As a commentary team, you must be super excited. Super nice.
Super nice, yes. It's going to be a little bit different tomorrow, and we're going to have to keep our eye on the groups. Obviously today the group formed from the word go, and it stayed there pretty much to the end. But tomorrow it's going to be different. We've got 6 climbs in total. As some said, that the start of the stage is relatively easy, but those 6 climbs, when they start, we've got a total of categorised climbing, just over 50 kilometres of categorised climbing, so an awful lot, and that doesn't include the uppy, downy bits in between. It's going to be a difficult day for many.
Well, let's talk about actually the different mountain ranges, because there's a number in France, and I think they're all being touched at some part or other during this Tour de France
which
this
is
year.
quite rare, all 5, yes.
Currently in the Pyrenees. What is the difference? Because they all have their own different characteristics, don't they?
It could rain. That's one of the things.
Is that something pretty specific to the Pyrenees?
It can be quite grim. They're fantastic climbs, but they're quite steep in places, and the road surface is not necessarily that great. So if it is wet, fingers crossed for everyone.
Yeah, I always find coming here that the Pyrenees are stunning when the weather's good. But they're a really miserable place to be when it's not. When the weather closes in, it quite often gets misty, as Rob's saying, and damp, and the roads are really greasy, and it's a thoroughly miserable day out. But, all things being equal, hopefully we'll be all right tomorrow. The Pyrenees basically are greener than the Alps.
They are indeed. In fact, I was just looking at the Col, which is just behind you up there. It's wreathed in a cloud as we speak. So how does that differ then to the Alps?
That's basically where the riders will be, isn't it, tomorrow up there?
I pretty much. I was going to look at it on map, but I wasn't too sure. But I think the riders do go up that, and it's it's imposing. We're fairly high as we are, and it's imposing just looking at it. How does that differ to the Alps then? Because the Alps is where we'll go on the final few days. We go up Col d'Izoard. How does that differ to that mountain range?
They're more open, and they're just longer climbs, bigger, twisty turns. I think it's a bit fresher there, if that makes sense. It's the mountain air. It's more chocolatey.
The rocky, rugged Alps and the green-topped Pyrenees.
So do you find different climbers, your Chris Froome, your Romain Bardet, do they prefer different parts? I was just trying to work out, because obviously if you look at it, if you're from outside of cycling, you go, a climb's a climb.
No, but over the years, I do remember hearing and reading that various riders in the Tour de France over the decades, some of them tended to do better in the Pyrenees, some of them would fare better in the Alps. So I think it's not unusual for riders to prefer one set of mountains to the other. I don't know if that's just coincidence.
A lot of it's to do with the rhythm. If the climb is a more gradual climb, more constant, then certain riders prefer that. If it's a little bit more, there's steeper sections that breaks up your rhythm, there are other riders who prefer that, a more punchier climber.
I must admit, they are beautiful. We were driving through the Pyrenees to get here. It's just the most stunning countryside, so it's going to be an epic stage tomorrow. Now, however you are consuming this bespoke, either via 5 Live or via the podcast, please do subscribe if you haven't just yet, or watching it on Facebook, do get in touch. We always like to hear from you questions, which can be fed into our commentary team tomorrow. They're on air earlier. You're on air from 2 o'clock tomorrow on the BBC Sport website.
Yeah, but we had some practice today because we came on at 2:30, but because the peloton was a little bit behind schedule, we had a full 100 kilometres to commentate on. So we're ready to go. We're up to speed now.
Does your heart sink at that moment?
Well, I've got to say the last 2 days, to a degree, yes. As much as we love the Tour de France, the racing has not been exciting at all. The Maché-Bodnar chase into Pau apart, we've had 2 exceedingly dull days on the Tour. I don't think it's been a great advert for the race. It's been a good advert for the tourist board of the Dordogne, certainly yesterday.
Beautiful countryside.
Yeah, beautiful countryside, but the racing has not been exciting at all.
Lovely wine as well, as we might have found out yesterday. I was saying if you want to get in touch, you can do at 5 Live Sport, #BBC Cycling. So Chris Froome, yes, it's been 2 not overly interesting days of racing, but he's had 2 serene days in yellow, which after Sunday and all the craziness that went on there, he probably would have wanted.
I was certainly happy, and I think he will be relatively confident in his team and his own abilities going into the next week of racing with the harder climbs. And it was certainly, it's not been handed to him on a plate, but I think this is probably the easiest entry into the high mountains that any Tour team has had, general classification team has had in recent history, certainly. But it'll all change, I believe me.
There was one significant thing happened today in terms of the overall. The situation hasn't changed at all in terms of the time gaps between the riders, but Dario Cataldo, who is like a super domestique for Astana, really handy rider for Fabio Aru, their leader. He's second overall, just 18 seconds down on Chris Froome. He fell today in a crash, broke his wrist, was taken to hospital, so to have surgery on that. He's out of the Tour de France. Jakob Fuglsang also crashed in that incident. It wasn't a high-speed crash, but he hurt his wrist as well. It's a wrist that he's previously broken. He did go back to the medical car during the stage, and his team director sportif said he was suffering with it quite a bit. So, Fuglsang, who's 5th overall, has clearly got a bit of a problem with his wrist, and they've lost a key rider. So Cataldo going out, Geraint Thomas going out for Sky. They're both of the top 2 in the Tour have lost important riders from their team.
Why has no one attacked Sky though? Because
there's been no place to. I mean, one rider who has, on a couple of occasions, wasn't that successful for various reasons. But Aru, he attacked on the Planche de Belfi. His advantage or disadvantage is only 18 seconds. That is the one rider who, out of all of them, who Sky and Froome really have to look out for. But as Simon's just said, he's a little bit kind of isolated to a certain extent now with having lost teammates. Contador, who's out of GC a little bit at the moment, he had 2 crashes today, so the chances of him attacking here in the Pyrenees might be put on hold a little bit for the Alps. So
what about Bardet though, Rob? Because his team were very active, weren't they, on the stage to Chambéry? And I think he's not afraid to have a go.
No, they're looking good, and he likes to animate the racing, certainly Bardet. So you can't discount anybody, certainly in that top 5 at the moment. Rigoberto Urán as well. His team not quite so strong, but Urán himself, he's in really good shape.
We were talking when we were over at the Team Sky Hotel. We were talking to the media guy from Team Sky, and he said, "Yeah, it's just like Cannondale when he did that sprint around and he was in single speed. They're just such a hipster team that now they're sprinting in single gears. They'll come with fixies next year." We're talking about Chris Froome, the wearer of the yellow jersey, the current leader of the Tour de France. We were speaking to him again today, and he was asked if it was another easy day at the office.
I wouldn't exactly call it that. I mean, it was quite a stressful day out there again, with the threat of crosswinds. Everyone wanted to be up front today, and I think we saw that in the number of crashes out on the road. So every time you could just hear a crunch of metal and carbon on the road, you're just praying you're on the right side of it.
Have the last couple of days felt like holding days in a way, and the business end of the Tour starts tomorrow?
Certainly. I mean, we've got two summit finishes now left in this year's Tour de France, and tomorrow's one of them. So it's going to be a very decisive stage, in my opinion.
The always polite Chris Froome there speaking to Gemma Sturber. So let's talk about his main rivals. We've got a summit finish tomorrow. There's hills all day. It's a big old day in the Pyrenees. Fabio Aru, Romain Bardet, they are his main rivals.
For my money, they are his rivals. That's it. I don't see, as well as Rigoberto Urán has ridden this year, obviously I might be wrong, I don't see him as a contender to win the Tour de France itself. He's been around for a long, long time, Rigoberto Urán. So it's not going to be... It'll be a big surprise if he's to really challenge for the yellow jersey above the other two to try and take it to Chris Froome. But I think so far Froome has shown that at this moment in time he's clearly the strongest rider in the race. So they've got their work cut out. But as we've seen, they've tried to design a course to encourage some attacking riding. Obviously, we haven't seen much of that in the last 2 days. That will change. I think Bardet will have a go, and Aru has shown the inclination to do that. But his team is not quite as solid and not quite as united, I think.
When you get onto the higher slopes, though, and we do have lots of those tomorrow, sometimes it doesn't matter how big your team is.
No, not necessarily, because they could all very well be isolated. Nairo Quintana, I mean, there's been very little talk of him lately because he hasn't shown, he's been distanced.
He's just over 2 minutes climbs. Though, so he's still in
and
there.
This is the thing. Day. If he can find his legs, if he has a good day, that 2 minutes could pale to nothing. That could turn into an advantage at some point. So I don't think there are any of those guys there or thereabouts that Chris Froome and the team can afford to let go up the road, like they did with Aru, for instance, last week. They gave him, an inch and he took a mile virtually. So they have to be wary of all of them.
And we should give credit as well to Dan Martin in 6th place and to Simon Yates in 7th. Simon Yates still in that white jersey as best young rider. Both of them less than 2 minutes behind.
So, Rob, say you were the director sportif looking ahead to stage 12 tomorrow, and you're not the director sportif of Team Sky. What would you suggest to those teams? How would you suggest that they take on tomorrow's parcours? Because you've got a summit finish, but there's big climbs and big descents before it.
I mean, we've got the final 2 climbs come back to back. So I think probably on the first one of there, that's the obvious choice, or on the third to last climb, on the descent maybe in the valley. But you're right. There are very few opportunities, but also there are a lot of riders who are scared, and this is one of the things that we see in the Grand Tours, especially now. We want to see the attacking, we want to see these flamboyant attacks and these big launches, but there are a lot of people who are scared because they only really have one or two attack in them, and this is the thing. You just have to hope that tomorrow you can put some kind of dent into the team and try and isolate Chris Froome, but as we've said, up to this point, Team Sky have had it relatively easy, so you've got to take them from a long way out. But who has got the strength and who has got the team around them? Because Quintana doesn't, Aru probably doesn't, Bardet is potentially the only
Bardet's team will, and I think that's what they'll try and do. They'll try and make Sky work as hard as possible, as much as possible, as early as possible in these mountain stages to try to give themselves the possibility of isolating Chris Froome.
It's that, or potential team leaders from different teams get themselves together and work against Chris Froome.
They're not going to work with Aru, though, are they?
No, and it's still a little bit too early. And that's the thing. Aru has kind of distanced himself from everybody else at the moment.
Do you think there's a problem with some of the riders who are looking like they might get onto the podium with Fabio Aru, Romain Bardet, riding not to lose rather than riding to win?
Yes, most definitely, because, there are riders there who, Dan Martin, for instance, will he ride for the win?
I hope he's so excited. He's such a great rider when you see him really going for it.
It really is, but for him, he's never been on the podium yet in a Grand Tour. That's the
Let's hope.
Do you gamble
tomorrow.
it? Do you gamble it against? Again, it's still very early.
You are. Well, Rob, you're setting it up perfectly for tomorrow. Stage 12 is going to be amazing.
Sports with Sean Caravilles.